Hello, and welcome to the Rollwise Show, where we talk about all things tabletop role playing. Today, we actually have decided to dive into a tabletop role playing advice book, I believe is the way you would call it.
It's another book report.
Recently, it's a book report.
Yeah.
You could call this the Rollwise Book Club at this point, with how many of these books we've read. A whopping two.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's two. I
Two,
think.
two this year.
Yeah, two.
Yeah, we've gone all in on books.
Have we done
So
three?
if
We
you-
may have done three. I think there was another one
no,
we did.
You're right. Three.
Yeah,
So we did the
three.
proactive, and then the Robin. Yep, and three.
Yep,
Aha,
we've done
third
three.
book.
Three book reports. We've
So-
done three book reports.
So now it's a thing. Rule of threes. It's now a thing. That's not a real thing. But today we're actually going to be talking about the No-Prep Gamemaster with the subtitle "Train Your Brain to Run Tabletop Role-Playing Games," second edition by Matt Davids of Dice Geeks. So this book, it was kind of a random reason I picked this up. I was scrolling through Audible last month. Maybe last month, they had a huge sale on the Audible website, and because I like feeding, Amazon and Audible, the big corporate folks, I just pumped a bunch of money in for very cheap audio book titles so I could keep myself entertained. And this book was on the list. It was actually just a couple $3 maybe or something like that. So I was like, hey, role playing book for $3, done. And so we listened to it, read it, and we wanted to kind of talk about it. So.
And what should we talk about before we get to the actual meat of the book and the role playing part of the book? What should we mention about the audiobook from Audible for everyone?
Okay, so what should we mention? First and foremost, I love audiobooks a lot. So it really surprised me when I saw that the narrator for the second edition was a virtual voice. So as with anything, when I say it's a virtual voice, it's literally like having Alexa read you a book. However, I would say that, and this would be my main critique of using a virtual voice over anything, is that in my experience, GMing turned into gimming, and that said a lot in this book.
That was the big one. That was the repetition that would drive an iron spike into your brain if it really bothers you.
It's like a record skip.
It says, it's GMing comes up a lot in the game, and the automated voice like to pronounce it gimming.
Yeah, gimming or gimmed, turns into gimmid.
Yep.
It was, like I said, it was like a record skipping every time it hit that in my brain, and just because my brain doesn't like that word, it hyper focused on it. It was probably said somewhere in the approximation of 1,000 times.
It was said enough to where I noticed, but it stopped bothering me after a while. But it's if you're the type of person that this sort of thing will bother, I suggest just reading it, because
I just read it.
It's not great, and the pacing's weird sometimes. Sometimes it would speed up at weird places.
It would, wouldn't it? Like, I think that was the other thing that was the other comment, is that, like, because that wasn't a natural tone, like, for a lot of it was fine, but there were these points where, like, it would change tone so abruptly, I thought it skipped a section.
Yep.
But then I would go back and listen to it again, and then I would be like, oh, it's just how it inflected that next sentence was so abruptly different that,
So if you're gonna go out and get it, if that's something that bothers you, probably don't pick up the audiobook.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can honestly, if you want to get the PDF of the book, you can get it on like Drive-Thru-RPG. You can get it on Itch. You can get it on, I think you can get a Kindle version on Amazon. And I think you can actually buy a physical copy through Amazon if you so wanted to go that route. So there's a lot of different ways to pick up the book if you want to.
I just felt it just stood out enough to where I felt like we should probably mention it, that it's especially the first time you hear it, it's pretty. What was that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and as Brent said, I'm sure, like, if you're one of those people that can just kind of like bury that hatchet, and it's fine. But other people are like, there it is again. Oh.
Yeah, it could be rough. Yeah.
So, but in reading the description for the book, the reason why it seemed interesting was because it kind of like. It was trying to let you know that there are ways to kind of reduce your stress and prep as a game master. And I think that that's something that I agree with one of the statements that he makes, that like a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves as game masters, and that can kind of dissuade them to being game masters. And I myself sometimes find, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I feel like I have to like create this vast tapestry of a story when all I really need to do is just have a bar, have a fight,
Well, you just
and
have to focus on the parts that the players are going to interact with.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
as people that run games and stuff like that, we have a tendency to think about like the wider world in general, and sometimes
Mhm.
you get a little bit lost when the players. But he brings it up. The players just never interacted with this rich story I had about all these other planets that I had made, and
Mhm.
the players never visited a single one.
Yeah, that was like a Star Wars thing. It was just like I
Yeah, it was
created in
a Star
like
Wars
solar
game.
systems, and they went to 4 planets.
Yep.
Yeah, and I get that. So I think that so I think that there were really 3 areas that kind of stood out to me in so much as that I read it because there are 3 sections of the book, the 3 arcana, I think he called them or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But pretty much there's a shift in the mindset. Pretty much that when you're GMing, you don't have to do all these things. You can use other resources to reduce stress and embrace improvisation. And I think just saying that kind of makes some people like really nervous because they don't feel like they're good at
Mhm.
improvisation, and so that's what they get into a little bit of trouble. And he says, and to kind of address that though, is he says random tables because I think that one of the things that people run into is that when they're put on the spot, they choke in that moment trying to make a decision as to what it is rather than consulting a table and rolling a dice and having the dice tell the story, as he says. And then the last thing is that really he talked about how as a DM, plotting. You can start the show, you can put some set pieces in there, but you really shouldn't plot out the entire story. You should let that kind of organically happen through play.
What he said about
And
the plot that I thought was really interesting is that
Mhm.
he defined the plot as what happens to the protagonist. And you really don't know in a role playing game. That's what makes it different than other media. Is you don't really have
Mhm.
a through line into what the protagonist is going to do because the players are the protagonists and their decisions are going to matter.
Mhm.
So plotting what the protagonists do. I mean, we've all had those games where
Yeah.
they're going to stay in the hotel that I want them to stay in. It's free. They have no reason not to. They have no reason not to stay in that hotel, and then they just don't.
Actually paid for. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We can talk about those in just a moment, but those were kind of the core concepts I had, and I thought we could tackle that shift in the mindset, between ultra prepping versus no prepping. But did you guys have any other takeaways that you wanted to explore in this, or was
No,
that?
Well,
I think those are the main points for me.
he calls it no prepping, but in my brain, I'm subtitling the book "Always Be Prepping."
Mhm.
Well, I mean,
'Cause-
that's the other way to look at it. Yeah, is you're either like you're always thinking about it or you're not. And I think I have opinions on it, but we can get to that in a minute.
sure,
Go ahead.
Sure. So let's talk. So let's bring that up in the mind set.
Mine shit.
There it
That's
goes.
our lives.
Um,
Mine shit. Okay, here we go.
so the first thing that happens in this is that when and this is where I always feel like it's kind of a trap when people say like low prep, no prep, because in what he's proposing is that rather than you spending all this time writing reams and reams of notebooks about your world, your setting, the NPCs, the items, and all that kind of stuff, is that you basically create a library up here of stories, fiction, and stuff like that by consuming it. So rather than stressing about what the players are going to do, you create a library of things that happen up here because you've seen movies, read books, read comics, whatever it may be, so that you can react and create situations for your players to explore on the fly. And
yeah,
so I kind of am curious because like I've heard that before. Like there was I don't remember this guy I watched, but he was a YouTuber or something like that. And people were asking, well, how do you keep on coming up with ideas to do all your YouTube videos? And he's like, well, I consume a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Like I literally, he's like, well, if I'm not making something, I'm consuming it. And I feel like as a hobbyist in this and telling stories, that kind of is something that if you consume more stories, you may not use that story exactly, but you may be able to put together a Frankenstein
Well, yeah,
story, which is interesting from enough places.
you passively consume inspiration,
Mhm,
or actively consume inspiration, depending on how you look at it, and that's sort of what
mhm,
he's talking about.
yeah.
What's interesting about this is a lot of the stuff that he does is kind of how I prep for games, because I don't sit down and prep for hours. I don't have the attention span for that, so I do a lot of the mental prep stuff. But I also do write things down. Like if I have an idea, I make sure I put it somewhere where I can find it and use it in a game in the future. And I think that's one of the things that I think isn't necessarily correct about this no prep idea. Is I think minimal prep is what really you shoot for as somebody running a game, not zero prep. Because I mean, you have to read the book usually, or at least parts of the book.
Right.
And that's prep. I mean, it's consumption, but it's also, media consumption, but it's also prep. So I think the no prep thing is a misnomer, just like kind of like Jeff said. Like it's either he kind of, it did come across as just always be prepping, just always think about how you can use this in a game in the future. Just consume media and think about running games, and which I consider also a pretty high stress like way to look at things. Like I'm gonna watch this movie to see if I can steal ideas from it.
Well, yeah. No, keep going.
Which you do, like as a GM, you do, but he kind of felt like he edged way towards.
Like he turned it into the grind set. Like
he turned it into a prep as much as like sitting down and writing a few ideas down.
Why did that scene follow the scene before it?
Exactly.
Why did the next one then come? Like what's really connecting them? He did mention that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're thinking about it so much, you might as well be sitting at a desk. In some senses.
Yeah, I kind of looked at it like he's focusing on the ideas and not the details, like not the minutia. Because he mentioned it a couple of times that if you have something that has to happen for the story to progress, the players are probably not going to get there.
Right.
They have to get in a fight with this one guy at the bar, right? Without railroading them a bit,
right?
They could, but it's problematic. It's like the whole you've got to unlock this door to face the final foe. We failed our check,
or you need to find the key to unlock the door, or somebody needs to pick the door, but you need to get through that door, and then it's like, oh yeah, we failed all of our rolls to get through the door.
So I like a lot of the ideas we've talked about and discussed on the show. We've read in some of the other things. Like I think I'm beginning to feel that like really good GMs, the GMs that don't get rattled easy,
right,
that have enough experience, are doing some of these things anyhow. They may be doing it in slightly different ways, but he's focusing on how I can stay nimble and how I can roll with the punches when the players throw weird things at me, And I think a lot of that he learned by experience.
Yeah, and there's techniques that work, and that's what people represent in these games or blogs or whatever, is the techniques that work. They're a little bit more customized because they're techniques that work for them personally, so they're presenting it from their perspective, which that's what a big part of what he's doing is he's presenting it from his perspective. I just don't believe no prep is the right way. I think minimal prep maybe, but not no prep. And I agree that you shouldn't write plots, but you definitely should write what was the term he used? It wasn't scenes, it was
set pieces.
Like you should definitely have ideas of things that you want to do. One of the things that I was surprised by was he said a couple things that I thought were strange. One, he talked a lot about wasting time. He's like, you're just wasting time if you do this. And if you write anything down or prep anything and you don't get to it in one game, like it's not wasted, because then it's something that you can use either later in that game or in a different game. So it's not really time wasted. And B, if you're the type of person that likes prepping, that likes writing ideas down for a game, like it's not really wasted time either. It's part of their hobby. And so I felt there was some issue. I took some issue with the way that was presented.
Yeah, it will, because he was a little antagonistic to prep. And I thought another comment that I was going to make, and I was just curious to see your guys' opinion, was if I'm recalling correctly, that he like the illusion of choice. Like basically, if you had a storyline prepped out for your players or something like that, and how the players weren't doing what you wanted, but you just maneuvered your story around what the players were doing to still make them do the things you wanted them to do. He didn't seem to be as big of a fan in that. from what I could tell. And
Yeah.
I was curious because I actually, that's one of the things I'll do typically, from my own experience as a GM, is that, like when I have a story set out, and probably much to, in opposition with this guy, is that I have like an idea as to what I want the players to experience. And I usually try to keep the middle gray. It's like I have a this and a this, and then I kind of fudge around in here until we kind of like wavy line to the end, right? Um, and I think that's fine. But he seemed very much against that type of play, because as the GM, you shouldn't know necessarily the ending either. And I thought that was an interesting concept.
I don't think the GM should know the end, but I think having planned things to happen, like he
Mhm.
said, set pieces is good. And I mean, I think the illusion of choice is important in some games, just because
Mhm.
like there's things that they don't have to happen, but they're going to be good if they happen. And so if you can, and maybe it's not even the illusion of choice. Maybe it's that a little bit of guidance to where they make the right choices or the choices that you think they should make. And if you can do that invisibly enough to where they can't tell, um, it's fine because they can't tell.
Yeah.
Like they don't know. They felt like they made the choice. Um, it's like when in our old or past lives when we used to coach people. When you can make your coaching element feel like it was their idea, like you get their
Mhm.
buy-in, and it's the same sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
if you can get the players to make them feel like it was their idea to go this route, like that's just as good as that's better than railroading because they think they did it, and
And
No,
it's
it's true.
rewarding. And it's rewarding then.
yeah. So, I mean, in totality, though, I mean, I think that the the mindset shift that I have the biggest problem of is like letting control of the story. So much so that it's like just free form. And I think we'll use that as kind of maybe a springboard to the next time. But the idea that it's like, well, the story can go anywhere. I feel like there's some problems with that too, because like the one time I tried to run that really sandboxy Delta Green Cthulhu game kind of petered out because we just didn't have, like, I wasn't able to get a strong motivation, and I didn't create compelling reasons for you to be doing stuff, and it just was like I got confused as to what I
I,
was trying to do
I
in that. And so it's like there's got to be a little bit of push and a little bit of pull, from both sides, I think, to get there. And
I
I'm not
think
sure.
I think sandbox is different than what he's describing.
Mm,
I don't think because he's talking about controlling the players through random tables
mm,
and set pieces and things like that. So he's still talking about like he's not talking about a sandbox. He's talking about their choices impacting where they go, but he's not
mm,
really talking about it being like, oh, you can make any choice. It's more like, oh, you choose to go in this room. Oh, there's roll on table. There's skeletons in the room. Like
mm,
there's proactive things that he's doing to push the players.
mm.
Whereas if you're totally sandboxy, you're like, well, what do you want to do? And this is one reason why, I think it's hard when like the some of the games that we played where they say we're more narrative, where it's like you're just asking the players, what do you want to do in this gigantic world? And
Mhm.
sometimes the players are just like, nothing. I want to go home, sit on my couch, or I can't think of anything, like because it's too big. Um,
right.
I mean, it's they have the problems that they have in the real world, most people have in the real world, where it's like, oh, I could do anything with my life. I'm gonna go to work. I'm gonna go make some money. That sort of thing. And like, so I don't think he's talking about sandbox games.
Maybe, but I think that is the idea of a low prep could work in a sandbox game too. It's interesting because in that scenario, it's like a hex block, for
I
example.
think
I,
you need to work harder in a sandbox game because you are going to constantly be throwing story hooks at people or set pieces at people to try
yeah,
and get them to be able to back it.
you'd better have a whole basket of story
Yeah,
hooks because a lot of them may get ignored.
yeah, you're good. You have to put pressure on them to do stuff, and so you have to have stuff. In my experience, the sandbox games that I run, there was a lot of work that I'd done in the background to make sure that there was like stuff to kind of motivate them or push them. If you have really proactive players who are like my character wants to do this, like
Mhm.
you can probably do it a little bit
Or
more.
the players have actually come up with motivations and goals that
Yeah.
they want to accomplish and are prepared. I think that works better because I took it as he was talking about it's not the GM writing the story, it's not the players coming up with the story, it's the two collaboratively forming the story and where it goes, and it may not end where you thought it was going to end at the beginning.
Yeah, and let's clarify, because he does in the game. When he talks about no prep, he's specifically talking about D&D style games.
Yes.
And D&D style games, you have a very focused idea of what the players are going to do. We're adventurers. We're going to go out and adventure. So, like, there's a clear thing that they're going to do. In your sandbox game, especially a Delta Green one, it was more like, oh, you guys are normal people. You have lives. What do you want to do for the day? And sometimes the answer is, well, I have to go pick up my kid from school. Which is
I have to open the bowling alley again.
Yeah, which is character driven, but it's not necessarily an adventure. So there's a ramp up until people like take some of those hooks. Whereas in D&D, like I said, the characters are very directed. It's very much, we're going to go out and get gold and get loot and have adventures because we're adventurers. That's what we do. Yeah.
So speaking of random tables, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the next area that I think that a lot of focus is that, like random tables. Now, some people love random tables, some people hate them. Where do you guys feel like you fit on the whole random table business? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you use them a lot? Do you not use them?
I don't use them a lot. I don't hate them, and I don't think people shouldn't use them, but he did say something that I do hate that happens a lot with random tables. He said if you're using a random table and something doesn't fit, don't make them roll again, or don't use it, or whatever. He said that. And the point that I would make is, why are you okay, so you either should edit that out of the random table so that stuff isn't there, or why are you using a random table if there's stuff on there that you don't want them to have? Because that's the point of the random table, is that they might get dog shit.
An old leather boot.
They might get shit that isn't useful or isn't what they wanted. That's why you have the table. That's why it's there. So if you're going to say, oh, you don't want that item.
Yeah, and tables are interesting because, like in Dragonbane, we used a lot of tables and a lot of randomness to affect certain parts of the story that, kind of like it's freeform. You roll this for treasure, you do this, do these things happen. And I think that tables have a certain place in so much as that they can inspire certain creativity. They can add elements that you weren't expecting to, spice it up or not. It could be just you run into a room and you find several dog bones. Okay, well, that's not very interesting, but
Right.
at least it's flavor, right? And then, I think what he was having, one of them is he was like, well, I give the players the ultimate thing because then they roll on the table, and if it's
then it's not my fault. It's not my fault if they roll something bad.
You rolled on the table.
Yeah, it's not me. It's not me fudging the dice. You rolled it.
I think that in terms of like where I've always been a little bit hesitant about tables, and I think it follows exactly what you were saying, is that sometimes if you have a table that's just a generic table and it doesn't have edited results, you get a very generic answers, right? They can be disjointed, they can be not helpful, they may not even fit at all with the mood, scenario, whatever you're trying to do. So there's a lot of that goes into that. And I know personally that some people build tables before they get into a game. Like they build their own tables to say like, hey, well, my players are going across the savannah. I want to create a random encounter table. So I want XYZ beasts, monsters, creatures. I want XYZ types of encounters with these types of people. Do they encounter the plains folk, the whatever? Those kind of things I think are bespoke to the situation and work much better than just
right.
I think they can. Those sound super detailed.
But that is definitely high prep.
That's a prep, and that's what I'm saying. Is tables are either high prep because you make them yourself, or you've customized a table. I think he said in there that he has books of tables for games. I think he said in there somewhere that
there's some published ones that are, but they have to be super generic,
right? And you have to edit them.
I'll be honest. I do have some of his tables.
Okay.
Yeah, they're because I didn't realize that I had some of his tables because I was like, okay, now there was a while in there that I was finding tables for like pay what you want or extra, like just a couple dollars or whatever on Drive Through RPG. So I went through my Drive Through RPG library and I was like, scroll. Aha, there's some. And I had picked up some of his tables. I don't think they were very expensive, but they were just, in some
Sure.
cases, 1 to 4 pages of what would you find in a lord's castle, like that kind of
Right.
stuff. And they were fairly generic. These ones were written back in 2016, so I'm not sure if how much his stuff has improved over time. But
I mean, it's a table.
sometimes a generic table is all you're
Yeah.
looking for if you're just looking for an idea.
No, for a lot of things, for ideas, I don't think it has to be super specific. I don't have a problem with tables. I have a problem with the information in the table, like because sometimes it feels to me like, oh no, this is just plain Jane enough that it's going to be fine, and I'm going to be able to fit it into anything. Or it's like, wow, like 7 of these 12 choices don't work at all.
Right.
Like, and then you're doing a lot of work. I think it's like any tool. I think it has its uses, but I think using them for everything all the time probably isn't the answer either.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And I think it was funny because he also mentioned, I had players roll on the tables and they loved it. It's like,
I
sure
think
they
some
did.
would.
It's like, sure they did. They got what they wanted on the table. What if they get what they don't want on the table? You're having that gambler's moment. You're having that gambler's high when you roll on a table is what you're having. And it's kind of cheap, in my opinion. And it can backfire. Like I said, if you're like the fighter and you're like, oh, and you're like, roll on the table for the magical item. And he's like, oh, I hope I get the sword. No, you get the wand. Give it to the wizard.
Do you remember those tables from like D&D, AD&D or whatever it was?
AD&D had a decent amount of tables. Some of them
were
were really good.
The Magic Cyclopedia and you said, oh, I rolled a weapon. And then you went into the subtables of subtables. I mean, like, as your point, you're just like, oh, I rolled a 97. Oh, that puts me on table 2C.
Right.
I have a chance for a Vorpal sword, and they're like, you're level 3.
You also have the chance for a roll of aluminum foil.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
So I mean, it is interesting because I think tables. I can't say that I think in the OSR community they've definitely embraced tables a lot more than say the stuff that I read or see in just general D&D. But I think tables are fine, and I think
they're fine.
I definitely think if you're stumped, it's a good place to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you should commit if you're going to use them. Oh, you rolled the dusty old shoes. I guess that's what you're getting.
Yep.
Hope you figure out something to do with that.
It would just
obviously give them to the house elf, Brent.
It's obviously a makeshift bolus later in the game, tied to choose together.
See, the problem is if I made the table, I would just be giving you guys way less loot. That's really what would happen.
Well, yeah.
How can you give us less than the 0 that we get already?
It's true. How would we get less than the no tables that we're rolling on now?
Oh, the goblin enforcer at the door demands your weapons before you can enter the dungeon. What? How are we supposed to fight? Improvise.
That's not his job.
You're the adventurers, not me. I'm just collecting the tax.
So the last thing, player agency. I think you guys had kind of talked about it. I'm not really sure we have much more to say about collaborative storytelling and letting go of control, but I do feel like that's where some DMs get in trouble is they try to control the narrative too tightly, and that's where I think sometimes players check out is because it's like, wow, my DM tried to run me through his upcoming book,
Definitely.
And it's like, well, rather than having any sort of fun or agency to do crazy, zany adventures, I just got stuck in plot line A, and I was not excited at all about it.
Yeah, hyper railroady's bad, but like one shots are going to be sort of railroady sometimes because you're putting them in a situation. So like, it has its place, but agency should always be important events in the game should always be ones that they choose. They should choose if they go right or left. You can maybe say, well, there's lights down the right-hand side. There's not down the left to try and get them to go a specific way. Although in that case, most of the times they're going to say the right sounds like a trap. So you can do
Good
stuff like
thing
that.
We all have dark vision.
Well, that too. The lights don't matter because we all have dark vision. But yeah, so like you can do things like that. But any big event should probably be player's choice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think he did. I think there were a lot of good suggestions throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were presented in a weird way in some cases, like you said, kind of aggressively at times.
So did you have any one that stood out in particular for you that you was either a quote?
How much you just
idea,
mentioned wasting time got me a little bit. Like he sort of said it in a way that was like, if you do this, if you spend prep time, you are wasting your life, is sort of how he said it. And I think if you take an hour to do prep time once a night or once a week to prep your game, I don't think it's like anything. Don't go overboard. Don't skip your kid's baseball game to be like, oh, I gotta work on this game for the guys. Like, don't do that. But if you have time, sit down, write a few things down, write a few ideas down, because they're going to be good. They're going to be good, and they're going to be moments that if you can work in there, they're going to work well because you have an idea of what it looks like.
So isn't that the thought process? Like always be writing, always be creating, always be doing that, because then it kind of like the muscle gets worked, so it's always better. Like
right.
Like you don't just sit down one day and go, I'm going to write a really good book. You usually write a lot, and then eventually, if you're lucky, you might clip into a place that has a good story or something like that, right?
Well, they always suggest if it's a hobby or something you're trying to get better at, like at least doing an hour a night. When the Warhammer community was like paint an hour a night. Whatever you're doing, paint an hour a night, you'll get there eventually. If you're an aspiring writer, start with writing an hour a night. If you're doing this, start with an hour a night. Because if you can get in that habit, it makes it more enjoyable, and you can get in the habit, and you can just keep doing it. Which he's also talking about forming a habit, but he's talking about forming a habit of consuming media and then analyzing it after every time you watch something.
Yeah,
which seems weird to me because you're gonna start watching stuff just to enjoy it.
fun.
You're gonna start watching it to.
No, I think you eventually get so advanced at the analysis, Brent, that it just happens in the background and you can enjoy it up front.
Your brain just works like a computer and you just tear that shit apart. The funny thing is I use a lot of media that I consume to write games, like write story ideas and stuff like that. So a lot of the things that he presented are stuff that I definitely do.
I like the ideas.
Which I think was neat.
I like the ideas. The execution, I had some questions about.
But I also sit and prep sometimes because you have to write those ideas. And if you're flooded with media, those good ideas will come and go. You won't remember all of them. So you have to write them down, or if they're poignant, sit down and write them down so you remember them, because they won't come up when you need them, I don't think, all the time.
Not always. All right. And Jeff, what about you? Where do did you have any standout ideas, quotes, parts of the book that really jumped out at you?
And I had this, I should have written it. Hey, Brent, to your point, I should have written this down. No, because for the last 20 minutes, I was like, I really need to remember to say this because it was near the beginning. Damn it, what was it?
Well, I have another part that I can complain about.
Go ahead. This is super engrossing video.
Well, let's do critiques and counterpoints. What didn't work for you, Brent?
Well, one other thing that I didn't like, one part that I didn't like was he was talking about taking the ideas from movies, wholesale, pretty much, just run them through a movie, and then he was complaining when somebody ran him through Star Trek.
Is it Deep Six or
5? It was Star Trek 5 or something like that. Yeah. He said it was just the movie. The guy just did the movie, but he's like, so don't make it a movie that anybody really knows. Make it a movie that's less popular. And I think he probably should have told him. The guy running the game probably should have told him, this is Star Trek 6. I want to see it from other characters' perspectives, and just ran the game. And I kind of didn't like that he just said I was disappointed the whole time. And it's like, well, why? Just do different stuff. Do stuff that didn't happen in the story. Do stuff that you think was new and would be new in that same story. The point isn't that it's Star Trek whatever it was. I think he said it was 5. But the point isn't that it's Star Trek 5. The point is that you're a different character doing this story. So do it differently.
Yeah.
I mean, there's games where people run movies I've seen
There are
modules.
yes, especially at conventions.
Yeah, so I think his perspective on it was unfortunate for that GM.
Well, and I mean, maybe not to, he can defend himself, whatever. If he wants to jump in the comments and defend himself, that's fine. But I think the idea to me that's interesting is that, and this is some stuff that I thought was pretty, because like in the beginning when he's kind of like laying out like why is he writing this book or what he's doing and why he's taking the approach and all that stuff, he talked about like, well, as a young boy, when I was getting into game mastering, I found that nobody wanted to do it. So I just ended up doing it. And then I found out nobody wanted to do it because they didn't feel like they could do it. And then I ended up being a forever GM forever.
Because they're liars and anybody can do it.
Yeah. And so it was kind of an interesting take because I did feel that. And I think that when you finally get to flip flip to the other side of the table, if you've been a forever GM and you were like, oh man, I kind of can predict this storyline. But I don't want to be a murder hobo because I don't want to disrespect my friend. But at the same time, like, if that's what you're vacillating on, I could see that. At the same time, though, whenever I get to play, I'm just so happy I get to play. I'll do whatever I want, including run to the bathroom while you guys fight off the big alien and mothership. Is that what I did?
That works.
Yeah,
I
think
did.
I did.
That did happen.
I did find my point. Brent helped me circle back around to it.
Oh, good.
And this is going to sound dumb on a book about being a better GM. The thing that stuck out to me was when he said, "How come there aren't more things written about how to be a better player?" And I was like, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
What we need are more guidelines for players.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's a ton, I think one of the things that we've seen with all of these books that we've read and the resources that we find on the web is that there's a lot of content telling you how to be a better GM. It's all, pick the stuff that applies to you and let the rest of it fall by the wayside,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of really good stuff, and there's just less about being a better player. And so I know it doesn't tie in directly to the book, but
no, it does.
I wonder though, devil's advocate here. Couldn't you just say any improv book?
No, well, sure.
It's true for the GM though too.
Yeah, but I'm just saying from a player's perspective, because you don't need,
that would be good.
You don't need to you don't need to create stories. You need to learn how to improvise. You need to learn how to stay in character. You know what I'm saying? Couldn't those be the books?
That would work, Mike. You're right.
But there's nothing that's going to guide players to that unless you're a GM and you go, hey, you kind of suck at being a player. You should pick up some books and read about how to improvise.
Join your local improv troupe.
That's probably a bad technique for getting them to do that, for the record.
It probably is.
And as we've said in multiple things, it's not that players are don't want to do these things. It's just that it's very hard to get players to do homework. There are sometimes when players are so engaged with whatever the campaign is that they do just naturally, but it's not. I mean, when I was a young child of the teenage years, I probably would have done a lot more outside of the game engagement. But now that I'm an adult and I game 2 hours a week,
we did do more. Yeah. I definitely read more gaming books when I was younger than I do now.
I don't know. I flipped this. I'm reading a lot more gaming books than I did back then, I think.
Well, we also do the show now, which encourages us to read more books. But I read just to read books. I read a lot. I mean, I read a lot as I was a nerd kid. Surprise, everybody! So I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of RPG books. But your time as an adult is finite, which is what his book is really about. Is your time as an adult is finite. Use it in ways that you can enjoy your hobby, basically. But one of the reasons I think there's less books about being a better player is definitely being a GM is the thing that it's because of that, his perception. Being a GM is hard, is what people think. And so people think they need more advice for being a GM. Whereas being a player, is the perspective is always you just show up and do what the GM kind of guides you to.
Laid out for you.
Which isn't true at all, because the players usually make the most bullshit decisions at the most bullshit time. And do things.
You had a bad day. You see a way to derail the story, and you just do it.
I don't like that goblin eyeballing you in the corner.
Let all the cows out.
Yeah, exactly.
What does a barn have to do with any of the plot that we have?
The whole ship.
Exactly.
Just stuff like that. And I think Yeah, I think there should be books on how to be a better player. I just don't think it has the same perspective as
It doesn't.
GMing. GMing's going to always be considered the hard part, and they're not a player. Like he said, I do agree with what he said in that too. He said the GM is not always looked at as a player of the game. So sometimes people don't give a shit if the GM is having fun, which I think is there's been a twist. There's been a turn in that recently in like the hobby, and I think that's important. Is the GM should also be having fun.
They should. Yeah. No, it's everybody at the table should be having fun. You should be able to find some path that gives everybody some of what they want.
I mean, essentially with the GM managing people, if anybody's ever been a manager at work or led people at work, that's hard. And that's what the GM is. The GM is a manager of the table. And it's a harder thing, and that's why there's more advice on it.
Yeah.
That's fair. I like that.
Although, and I did have one before I forgot it, like Jeff, because this one came to me, is I did find it was interesting, is that one of the comments he made in his book about no-prep GMing is that sometimes he said that like modules and stuff like that are more satisfying than his approach. Do you remember that? Like, because it just has a more coherent story or something.
Well, sometimes, so here's the thing that I think more GMs should realize is sometimes players like being told a story. They don't necessarily want to be totally railroaded, but they like that there's a coherent direction that they're supposed to go. Yeah. And they don't, I mean, we played sucky pre-generated ones. We played ones that are really good. But there definitely is sometimes the desire to be like, I don't want to contribute to the story as much as open narrative.
I just want to live in it.
Yeah. I just kind of want to live in it and do this thing. And I think one shots are good for that.
I did also. Now you're pulling me back into other things. I like the idea of just mining pre-published stuff.
100%.
The bits that you like, figure out a way to use those, and get rid of the ones where you're like, oh, it's boring.
Yeah,
I don't like that. That's too complex.
That's an excellent idea. The other thing that's good about that, mining those stories, is if you ever want to run a game and you're not sure what the feel of the game is going to be, pick up a one-shot, a pre-generated adventure, and read it. That's why I like examples of play or like pre-generated starter adventures. Like Teeth is a good example. Like the 3 adventures for Teeth give you an exact idea of what the game is going to feel like if you run a game, or should feel like. And I think that's important for games, because essentially rules are rules. So what you're looking for is the tone and setting of the game, usually to be different. So
yeah. So I think with that, I think we can pretty much put it to our final thoughts, unless you guys had something else you wanted to cover beforehand.
No, I think it's good.
Because I mean, really, in terms of like final thoughts on this, I felt the book, it was good. I would put it as an average read for this type of thing. It wasn't terribly long, so if you're looking just to kind of get more inputs into different perspectives of GM type play and all those kind of things, it's good. Especially if you're a beginning GM that really does feel overwhelmed with the expectations that everyone seems to have foisted on you. This is a book that I think kind of gives you a permission structure not to be perfect at GMing, which is kind of
from someone
nice
in the
it's important.
From someone in the industry, it is kind of nice.
Yeah. Someone in the know, or at least someone that's been around for a long time, which is good. I would say though, is that as more of a veteran DM, I felt that there were less tangible, like higher order techniques and stuff like that came from this. Having recently read Robin Law's game mastering book, it was really interesting, because it did dive into a lot of specific details and how you could use these techniques. And I do feel like some of that meat was missing from this book. So as a veteran person, I probably would have looked for more like, well, like if he likes to use tables, I mean, was he trying to advertise his tables, or was he going to tell me how I could build tables more effectively? You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that come into play? So I think that would be my only thought, is that, it does feel like it could be a much better read for a person who's newer into the hobby, and maybe less so if you've been in the hobby some more. But that's my ultimate critique. I read the book, I bought it on Audible, and I bought a PDF of it. So whatever, he's got my money. Twice. What about you guys?
I enjoyed reading it. I think there's always something to take away. And as somebody who doesn't GM as much and feels a lot more unsure about doing some of the things that comes a little more naturally to you two specifically, I like hearing things like that. I like hearing that it's okay to improvise. Almost that you're getting some permission to do that because you do. We see so much stuff. You watch Critical Role, right? And they are role playing. They are role playing on a different level than I role play. And I'm not. It's not bad, but it's also not fully realistic for a home table. That everybody's going to have special voices for everything, and is going to be totally in character all the time, and the GM's going to be incredibly inventive and think on their feet. I think most GMs actually do that better than we give them credit for all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I I think it was a worthwhile read. If you get a chance to check it out, and you have some questions about not spending 10 hours a week prepping for your game, you might find some ways to free up some time.
Yeah. Or you'll spend more time consuming media. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, you'll substitute the 10 hours.
You'll start spending 10 hours reading.
I've got to watch all the classics.
I gotta watch all the things on this list. So my thoughts on it, I kind of agree with you, Mike, that I felt like there was a lot of good ideas, but they weren't fully grounded. He said these are things that you can do, but they weren't quite like the Robin Laws book where they were spelled out exactly, like do this, do this, do this. This should be the result. So I felt like some of the stuff is kind of a little less actionable or a little less toothsome, I would say, in the book that you can turn onto. But I do think the permissive part is very good. People need to know and read that it's okay to not always be the perfect GM, and it's okay to ad lib, and it's okay to not prep. I really do think people prep too much for a lot of games. Like if you put that much pressure on yourself and you over prep, it can be really stressful. I used to do that, and I really try and be more free with my games and improvising when it comes up. That doesn't mean I don't write one shots that railroad the shit out of players, because I do, but they're one shots, and that's kind of the you're going to kind of do that in a one shot, because your characters you're not going to say, okay, this is a one shot, you guys can do anything that you want to do, because then you're not going to do the one shot. But anyways, the other thing that I think was really good for him to say out loud in the book that I don't get, since things get said enough, is if you want to be a GM, the way to be a GM is to be a GM. Go out, run games, get your reps in, practice it. That's what it's about. And if you keep doing that, you'll get better, and it will be rewarding. Running a good game, the first time one of your players bring up a game that you played 2 years ago, and they tell you, like, they're telling their friends, they're reliving that moment around a table where you're all talking or on your Skype call or whatever, and they're all laughing about it, and they're like, remember when? Like, the moment that happens, that is like one of the most rewarding things that you can do as a GM, because that story stuck. So that's what makes GMing rewarding, and that's why you should go out and GM more. And if you're reluctant to GM, just do it. Your friends are going to have fun if they're your friends. And if they say you suck at it, they're not your friends, probably.
Well, that kind of reminds me of what he wrote in the beginning. It's just like, I was heaped undeserved praise in those first games. They were just like, you did fantastic. And he's like, I did shit, but it's I just ate it up.
But that's probably not true. It's the funniest part is if the players, as he says later in the game, if the players are having fun, Robin Laws even said it, if the players are having fun, you're doing it right. Regardless of what anything else, if your players are enjoying themselves, you're doing it correctly, because that's what it is. It's about sharing that story and it being fun.
Yeah,
so.
No, that's good. Well, thank you guys for going down this rabbit hole with me. I appreciate it. I feel that more book reviews are definitely on the horizon. So if anybody has any book reviews or
books you would like us to review,
if you have any books you'd like us to review, that would be great. And of course, if you made it to this part of the episode where you've gone all the way to the end, we thank you. We appreciate you listening to all this stuff. Leave your comments down below. Of course, if you like this kind of thing, like, subscribe, share with your friends, whatever, do that, all that good stuff. But yeah, thank you. And Jeff, if they want to reach us outside of YouTube, what would they do?
You can find us on social media, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter. We are at Rollwise. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for joining us. We appreciate having you here. We're happy we hit 600 subscribers. Thank you for that. Anybody that's made it this far that subscribed, thank you again. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
Thanks.
Yeah.